Well, they make sequels to everything else. This was inevitable.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
It's 2024, and there isn't an original idea in Hollywood. Every year we get a sequel or a reboot to another classic film. 9 times out of 10, they're pointless and pretty bad. For every Fury Road, there's a Furiosa. For every Tron Legacy, there's a Matrix Resurrections. And for every Disney Star Wars, there's itself. In the pantheon of great Star Wars content, Spaceballs ranks number 4, just after Return of the Jedi. Not only is Spaceballs the greatest Star Wars parody of all time, sorry Stealing Solo, it's a bona fide comedy classic. And because it's 2024, there has to be a sequel. But before we get into that disappointing news, today's video is brought to you by me, Jeff Hicks, and the greatest Star Wars parody since the original Spaceballs, Stealing Solo. Stealing Solo asks the greatest what-if question of all time. What if a group of disgruntled Star Wars fans kidnap Harrison Ford and force him to remake Star Wars in their basement? That, and a whole lot more, is answered in Stealing Solo, a Captain's Parody. Stealing Solo has been called Laugh Out Loud Funny and the greatest Star Wars parody since Spaceballs, and it's available now for a limited time only. Go to StealingSolo.com, which is powered by Shopify, so you get the reward-winning safety and security, and get yourselves a copy today. Once we sell through this limited backstock, I'm going back to the drawing board to bring you the sequel, which parodies Luke Skywalker's fall from grace, and finally the closing chapter, which I can't wait to get to, Frankenfisher, the Bride of Solo. And yes, it's exactly what you think it is. So folks, the only way to get that is go to StealingSolo.com right now, get yourselves a copy, and enjoy the greatest Star Wars parody since Spaceballs. Spaceballs is a classic. There's nothing new to say about it. It's pretty much perfect. It's the perfect blend of Mel Brooks' absurdity, Star Wars, and Star Wars. Released in 1987, the film lampoons not only Star Wars, but the hype surrounding it, other science fiction, and of course, the merchandising. It had a lot to say about Star Wars after it ended, and now that Disney Star Wars feels like it's over, Spaceballs is back. A Spaceballs sequel is in development at Amazon MGM Studios. Josh Gad is set to star and will produce alongside Mel Brooks. The project is in its early stages and plot details are being kept under wraps. Amazon declined to comment. The writing duo are best known for their work on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, Pokemon Detective Pikachu, Addams Family 2, and the upcoming Disney Lucasfilm special, LEGO Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy. The original 1987 MGM film Spaceballs starred Bill Pullman as Lone Star, John Candy as Barf, not in here, this is Mercedes' pal, Daphne Zuniga as Princess Vespa, funny, she doesn't look Jewish, Rick Moranis as Lord Dark Helmet, what's the matter, Colonel Sanders Chicken, and Mel Brooks as President Scroob, and Yogurt. Hail, Scroob, may the Schwartz be with you. The space opera is a parody of both the Star Wars franchise and other popular sci-fi franchises like Star Trek and Alien. This isn't the first time Brooks revisited a classic comedy in recent years. In 2023, he wrote and produced History of the World Part 2, a follow-up to his 1981 Part 1. Brooks, one of the few entertainers to boast the prestigious EGOT status, directed and starred in films such as Blazing Saddles, you can't make that anymore, Young Frankenstein, you can't make that anymore, and Robin Hood, Men in Tights. You can't make that anymore. He was also honored with a Career Achievement Award at the 84th Annual Peabody Awards earlier this month. I really cannot praise Spaceballs enough. If you watch our show, you've seen the Spaceballs buttons. If you've read Stealing Solo, you know I love parody. We all have the utmost respect for Mel Brooks and his work, except History of the World Part 2. And that's what we're working with in 2024. Much like Star Wars is a shell of its former self, Spaceballs 2 will be a shell of its former self. How can you know? Well, look at Entertainment Today. It's superficial, commercial, and hollow. Wasn't it in 1987? Not really. While every decade has mindless films, there was a balance. The people behind the films had a better pedigree. I get that Mel Brooks is attached, but that's just it. Mel Brooks is attached. This is a Josh Gad joint. All of the great Star Wars parodies like Spaceballs, Fanboys, and our own Stealing Solo have something to say deeper about the film or the franchise. Spaceballs rips on the merchandising, Fanboys lampoons the fans, and Stealing Solo rips on Disney Star Wars. What's Spaceballs 2 gonna do? Rip on Disney for ruining Star Wars? I think not. Remember, Josh Gad is the snowman from Frozen. Anything he does or say about Disney Star Wars will be Disney Star Wars approved. Even the writers write for Disney Star Wars. It's safe to guess that Spaceballs 2 will be like The Boys Season 4, where it rips on one side of the aisle, then rips on the same side again and again and again. There's no balance to the Force. Do you really need a commentary on fake headlines from websites like Forbes? Remember, the people are the ones who are spending money on your film. You can't take a shit on them and expect them to like it because it's in vogue out west. Comedy today lacks balls. You may get these edgy guys on podcasts, but entertainment doesn't have the balls to do that on TV or film. Spaceballs has some great jokes. Great comedy, much like rock music, is a thing of the past. Everything is sanitized. There's no natural edge, just edgelord parodies. Remember, Spaceballs isn't just funny Star Wars, it's a funny movie. Most of the jokes are beyond Star Wars. Comb the Desert, The Wonders of VHS, Mega Maid's gone from suck to blow, all outside of Star Wars. Some would argue that Legacy sequels can be good. Tron Legacy, Rocky Balboa, Ghostbusters Afterlife, they're all solid. Some are even better than the original. Top Gun Maverick is the best Top Gun film. And that's about it. Most Legacy sequels are trash. Independence Day Resurgence, Indiana Jones 4, Indiana Jones 5, the entire Halloween trilogy, Superman Returns, the entire Disney Star Wars trilogy, the list goes on and on and on. Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money, will likely fall into the latter category thanks to the talent involved. Or the lack of talent involved. Beyond John Candy, Joan Rivers, and Dick Van Patten, Spaceballs 2 will be lacking its true star. Fulfilling a decades-old prophecy, and by prophecy I mean a throwaway joke that is clearly never meant to be taken seriously, Mel Brooks' Spaceballs is finally getting a sequel. Whether or not it's called Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money, remains to be seen. Last week, Josh Gad posted an image of a heavily redacted screenplay on Instagram, indicating that he was working on a mysterious movie that could be based on characters created by Mel, and opens with the scene text reading, Exterior, Starfield. Fans quickly deduced that Gad's script was for a sequel to Spaceballs. It was either that or Passion of the Christ spin-off set in the distant future. Now it's been officially confirmed that a Spaceballs follow-up is in development at Amazon MGM. Right after the project was announced, the great Rick Moranis' name began trending online, owing to the fact that a lot of fans don't want a Spaceballs sequel if it doesn't feature Dark Helmet. And while not everyone will be thrilled with this news that the beloved property is now in the hands of Olaf, the talking snowman, Gad may be uniquely positioned to bring the original living cast members back together. After all, it wasn't long ago that Gad was announced as the star of another 80s Rick Moranis comedy reboot, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids Legacy sequel titled Shrunk. While Shrunk ultimately fell apart, thankfully, it was a rare project to land Moranis, who famously stepped back from taking live-action roles decades ago but agreed to reprise his role of Wayne Zielinski. Not even the makers of the new Ghostbusters have been able to lure Moranis back. In addition to sharing a connection with Moranis, Gad previously worked with Lone Star himself, Bill Pullman, in the mostly forgotten sitcom 1600 Penn. Of course, it could be argued that any continuation of Spaceballs is just an innately bad idea. The best evidence is probably the short-lived 2008 cartoon, which was created by Brooks and served as a sequel of sorts, but the G-Force series quickly devolved into a lazy parody of non-Star Wars franchises like Harry Potter and American Idol. As stated earlier, the writers have worked on films such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem and the upcoming Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy, which is a comedic take on the franchise featuring badass Ewoks and Darth Jar Jar. Side note, it's very cringy, safe, Disney-approved comedy. Don't laugh, it's not funny. So clearly the writers have a deep appreciation for not just Spaceballs, but for Star Wars, and there's a lot more Star Wars content to parody in 2024 than there was back in 1987. Yeah, it's a joke itself. Hopefully the new movie will lead Brooks to break his no merchandising agreement with George Lucas and we can finally get our hands on some Spaceballs branded flamethrowers. So yeah, no one wants this. It's sad that another classic gets dug up, reanimated, and parodied around like it's new. If you like that concept, check out Frankenfisher, The Bride of Solo. It's a stealing Solo sequel I'm working on right now. If you haven't read the original, you can click the link below and read it for yourself. It's been called Laugh Out Loud Funny. I'm proud of that. I can guarantee it has the balls that Spaceballs 2 will lack. So folks, what did you think about this news? Our Twitter feed has been blowing up like crazy the last few hours because everybody and their aunt wants to talk about how absurd Spaceballs 2 is. This is a joke. It's like that movie Hamlet Part 2. You don't do it. Spaceballs is great as it is, and there's really nothing to add to it. So like most legacy films, it'll just ruin the legacy and it'll piss a lot of people off. Sure, it'll get the younger generation talking, but who gives a shit? They weren't going to buy Spaceballs anyway. So folks, what do you think about this news? As you know, we're dreading it. Like all modern entertainment, it turns out to be pretty crappy. But that's all I have to say. I don't have faith in Spaceballs 2 because I don't think Josh Gad is very funny at all. I expect it to be a lot like The Big Bang Theory. It's very on the nose, it's very safe, it's very boring, and it's not that funny. And that'll be sad that another Mel Brooks property, well, shits the bed. So folks, thank you for watching. I'll be back next time with more in a few hours tonight on the podcast. But in the meantime, be smart, be safe, be cool, but always be excellent to each other.